All right. Welcome to day 3 of daily drawing. Today the request was a Razorback, so we're going to start with a Razorback. We're using both of these. There's a more cartoony one and there's a more realistic one. This one's a photograph and this one is a logo design. I don't want to copy this directly because that's another artist's design and I don't think it's fair to that artist if I copy it exactly the way it is. So I'm going to kind of make it in this pose. So it is going to look a little bit more on the cartoony side, but we will kind of add a little bit of extra details for you to see how you could make that look a little bit more realistic. All right, so to start off with, I'm going to draw the body. So I noticed that the body has 2 separate pieces to it. We have the barrel of the chest, and then we have the hip bones at the back. So we can see that the artist actually drew that originally in their design as well. So to get started, I'm going to do the barrel first. So it's just going to be kind of like a egg shape or an ovally shape like this, and it's an egg ovally shape that's kind of longer rather than taller. I do notice that the back leg is separate from that ovally shape because we have the belly connecting the two. So what I would do is indicate however far back that you want the body. Now this body is a little long compared to this one. If you want to keep it shorter, you're going to push that the hip bones closer to it. If you want it longer, put it further apart. All right, so here's the barrel of the chest. I want to have my hip bones somewhere in this area. Remember, you can have it further away or closer. It depends on how long you want your hog. All right, so I'm going to draw kind of like a ovally, circle-y thing that's close to, I want to put something in the middle between these two. So it's close to it, but there's not like a huge gap in the between. If you want to make them almost touching, that's fine, or if you make it a little longer, that's fine as well. All right, so once I have my barrel of the chest and I have my hips, then I'm going to connect them. Here we can see that they have connected it with a curve, and then this one right here is kind of more of a frown. It depends on if you want a chubbier or a thinner hog. So this one's very muscular, so it's got a little bit of a smaller look to it, and this one's very bulky, so it's a little bit bigger. So the top part, though, I do still want to connect. I'm going to start at the top of the barrel. I'm going to do a smile to connect to the top of the other part. Okay, so, and that's okay if it was higher up or lower down. You still just connect the tops to the tops with a little bit of a smile. And then on the bottom part, you can either connect it with a smile if you want it a little bit chubbier, or you can connect it with a frown. Or what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to combine the two. I'm going to start with a smile, and then I'm going to do what's called a wonk. A wonk is where you're going to start with a smile, and then you're going to change it to a frown. So I smile, and then I frown like this. And that makes it to where we have a little bit of this indentation, but we also have kind of the bigger part sticking out as well. So that's kind of up to you how you want that to look. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the head and the neck. The head and the neck on pigs are very like together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the top of the body. I'm going to do a curve going down, but it's going to start curving and then it's going to be kind of a diagonal line and then it's going to go flat. So it's going to look like a greater than or less than sign, but the greater than or less than sign is going to have a flat spot at the end of it. So to draw that, I'm going to start at the top of the body. I'm going to start curving down until it looks like it can start going straight on its own, and then I'm going to go down straight. So this is kind of depending on how big you want the head. This artist has drawn the head extremely large. The realistic one is a lot smaller, so it's up to you if you want to draw a little bigger or a little smaller. You do whatever size that you're particularly wanting. I'm going to try to keep it kind of in between these two, so a little bit bigger than this, but not nearly that big. All right, so after I do my diagonal line, I'm going to then change a flat line here first, so it's kind of like a small diagonal line. And then I'm just going to do a flat line to connect it back to the body. So it's going to look really weird at first. Just trust me, okay? All right, so this is going to be my neck and my head. This is the barrel of the chest. This is the stomach, and that's the hip bones. All right, so for the head part, it's a little tricky. The first thing I would draw to establish the head is the jawline. We have kind of a curve going up here. We can actually see the artist has indicated the jawline in the original one as well. So to draw the jawline, it's where you have this line connecting to the kind of eggy shape, the barrel. Start here, and then what you're going to do is you're actually going to draw a curve going up like this, about halfway into that body area. So it's essentially you're adding a parenthesis to it, okay? After you have established that parenthesis, you see this little line here, we don't need that one anymore, so we can get rid of that, like this. All right, so this is going to get us our jawline, this is our muzzle, and this would be like the forehead area. So before I move on though, I would go ahead and draw the ear, and then we can change up the face. Don't worry, we'll get to the body later, okay? So for the ear, it's gonna go, here's my jaw. The ear is above the jawline, so I'm just gonna go above the jawline. This is gonna be where I put my ear. The ear is essentially a teardrop shape, like this. It's where you're just drawing a smiley face, and then you're drawing a V on the top of it. except you want to make sure it's not like super perfect unless you're wanting to go for the super cartoony look. All right, so now also, by the way, it's like this, but without this bottom part being drawn. Now, if it helps, draw that bottom part and then just use your eraser. So here I can see that the teardrop is kind of small and squished, and then I can see a tiny piece over here. So I'm just going to draw, I personally like to keep that curve and then erase it later. So I'm just going to draw a smile, add a triangle. It's okay if it goes past this line right here. If you want a bigger ear, it's okay to go past that line. You don't have to squeeze it to fit, okay? All right, so there is a indication of the ear. And you can change the angle. If you want leaned back a little bit more, you can. If you want leaned forward, that's entirely up to you what position that you want that ear in. I just kind of like this alert, attentive position, so that's why I'm going to keep mine going upwards. All right, and then I do see a tiny indication of the other ear. All I'm doing is just drawing essentially a V going down, so that'll be that part of the ear. All right, so something that I see indicated in both of these pictures is the forehead, and then it has an indentation whenever it hits the muzzle. So after we do the forehead, we're going to indent and then draw the muzzle. So right here, this is too smooth. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow this to continue going into diagonal. Once you get a little bit further out from the ear, what you're going to do, though, is you're going to do a slight diagonal change, like this. And then you're going to continue that to connect to the top of the muzzle, like this. So it drops down, curves a little bit, and it goes all the way out towards the nose, okay? Once you have that, then you can use your eraser and get rid of this extra line here. This is going to make that slope that it needs for that forehead piece. All right, now we're going to do the nose. The nose does bump out a little bit, so we do have some kind of wrinkly textures and the nose bumps out. Here you can see this artist has also done that. Notice the nose is higher than the muzzle. So to do that, what I would do is I'd start at the tip of the muzzle, and then we're going to just add a big frowny face to it and allow that frowny face to go into the muzzle a little bit. And then you can use your eraser to kind of erase away that extra piece. And then in order to make that look wrinkly, all you're going to do is you're going to draw additional frowny faces. And those frowny faces will help make that look like it's a wrinkly texture of the nose. Excuse me. All right. So after we have the wrinkly texture of the nose, you can go ahead and do the circly, ovally thing. Now, because it's from side view, it's not going to look like a circle. It's going to look like a big ovally shape for the actual nose hole nostril. Yeah, nostril. Let's see. One, two. I don't see 2 teeth on here, but I'm assuming it's just because the picture's so dark. So we're going to go ahead and draw the 2 teeth. We'll draw them similar to how this looks. Because it looks very similar on that one. It just doesn't have the weird spiky teeth on the inside of the mouth, but you can draw those if you want to. All right, so what I'm going to do for the mouth is I'm actually going to draw it without teeth first, and then I'm going to go back and then add teeth. So what I would do is I just start right here where we have the muzzle ending, and then I'm just going to draw kind of like a smile at first, and then I'm going to switch it into a frown. This is another one of those wonks, the same one that we used on the belly. So slight smile, switch to a frown. And then what I would do is I just curve that back into the muzzle part. So you can make that, you can make them happy if you want to. Just bring that up a little bit higher if you want them smiling, or if you want them extremely angry, bring them down a little bit more. But this is just going to draw that kind of opening that we need for the mouth in order to put the teeth and stuff in. So it's essentially, once again, a teardrop shape. All right, so speaking of teardrop shapes, that's kind of essentially what the teeth shape are, is they're kind of like really long, thin teardrops. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to erase a little bit of this top of the mouth, and then I'm just going to draw the indication of where the teeth are. On this one, the teeth are actually a lot shorter than they are on here. If you want to draw them longer, draw them longer. I'm going to keep them a little bit shorter though. So to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw a slight frown, like this, or a parenthesis. And I'm just going to draw another one that's also slightly curving to make kind of like a shorter, thicker looking, what are they called, tusk? Yeah, tusk. And then the other one is facing the opposite direction with another smile at the bottom. So here I'm just going to actually leave it like that. I'm just going to shade in this part. If you want to draw those additional teeth, all they are is they're just really tiny teardrops is essentially all they are. So if you wanted to add more, you can. All right. The chin bumps out a little bit. So right here, this is too skinny. So we need to add a little chin bump. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a smile to the bottom of the no, I was going to say beak. He doesn't have a beak. All right. Adding a smile to the bottom of the muzzle, and then allowing that to continue on for the rest of the face. And then I can use my eraser to clean that up. So now I have a pretty good indication of the hog's face. It's okay if it doesn't look exactly like this. You can make it look a lot more similar to the original design or however you want it to look. Now, something that's unique about this thing is that instead of doing in between nose and ear for the eye, because it's usually what you do, it's actually going to be in between this indentation where we have the forehead and the ear. That's going to be the location of the eye, is in this general area. So right about here is where we want to put the eye. It's kind of up to you what shape you would like to do. If you want to do something similar to this, all it is they're drawing kind of like a Nike check sign, essentially. And then they're adding a smile underneath it with like a little dot for the actual eye. So that's how this particular artist is kind of drawing it in this style. You don't have to draw it exactly like that. Here I've actually exaggerated the eyebrow a little bit more. If you want to draw it a little bit more just in a generic cartoony sense, you can also just do a diagonal line with a smile underneath it to draw it kind of a little bit more like the angry Huffy Puffy looking warthog thing or whatever. So all that is there's lots of teardrops. I've never noticed that. Lots of teardroppy shapes in drawing a Razorback. All right, so now we're getting to the fun part for the legs. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to establish the shoulder. We actually see the artist has drawn the top of the shoulder lump here, and this whole part right here is the Razorback shoulder. They're extremely buff, so we want to draw it really big. Here we can actually kind of see that here as well, the bump for the shoulder. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start, this is where the shoulder is going to start, is where the curve of the body met the curve of the barrel. Now if you have this connecting up here, don't start it there. Start it about halfway-ish in the body, somewhere in there. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw a big oval shape on the back of that barrel, like this. That's going to indicate where my shoulder is going to be. Once you have that oval shape drawn, then you're going to start drawing the actual legs themselves. So for this first leg, I see that it is bent. So I'm going to have kind of like a diagonal line and a flat line, kind of like a greater than less than sign that's opened up. And then I'm going to have another greater than less than sign, and then I'm just going to curve that all back up to the body. So to draw the first part, I'm going to start on the back of my shoulder. I'm going to go down until I get just a tiny bit past the body, and then I'm going to go bring it in like this. So here's my first kind of, is that obtuse angle? Yeah, there we go. And then I have my greater than less than sign right here. Now, make sure that they're not being super perfectly pointy. You want to make them slightly rounded. That way they don't look too mechanical, unless you're going for mechanical, which would be pretty cool. All right, so after I have this is going to be where the foot ends. I'm just going to first start off with drawing a big curve, like this. And then I'm going to actually stop it whenever it gets about halfway-ish into the body, so that it's going to look like this. So we want to make this a little bit thinner, this a little bit thicker if possible. So this is going to give us the curve that makes up the angle that the leg is moving at. I want to keep this until it gets about halfway up, and I want to keep this until it almost gets to the top. You can keep kind of the top shoulder, but you don't really need to keep all of it because otherwise it looks a little too round. So I would keep about like maybe this much of your shoulder. That way it still looks really buff and stuff. For this other leg, it's going kind of out in a diagonal line. It looks like it starts right about here on the torso. And then we see a diagonal line. There is a little bit of a flip up where the foot's running that you can draw that if you want to. So all I did was a diagonal line, slight opposite change, and then I'm just going to draw a flat line for the bottom of the foot, and then I'm just going to bring it back up until it touches the, wrist of the other part of the foot. We'll come back to the feet here in a second. All right, so that's the front feet. For the back legs, we already have the thigh drawn, so we don't have to redraw that. We do want to have the ankle bump, though, so we're going to draw from the back of the thigh, we're going to draw a curve for the ankle bump, and we're going to curve it back for the other part of the leg, and then we're just going to meet it back up to the body. So to do that, I'm going to start at the back of the thigh. I'm going to curve in a parenthesis like this. So notice that I start at the top, and then I just kind of, because I want that to all flow very naturally together. I don't want there to be like awkwardness or something going on there because that just looks weird. So here I have the curve for the back of the leg. This is going to be where my ankle is, so then I'm going to curve it down again. This is going to give us that little lump that we need for that ankle bump. Now this is going to be where the foot's at, so I'm just going to cap that off with a parenthesis. Now to draw the front part of the leg, it stays fairly thin until it gets to the opposite side of the ankle. As soon as it hits the ankle, it gets bigger again. So I'm just going to follow this up, almost with a parallel line to this one. And then as soon as I get across from the ankle, though, my goal is to connect it to here with kind of a curve. So if it helps, start on the actual leg itself, and then curve it down until it connects, and then I want to connect it with kind of a soft curve right there. So that'll make up the back leg. We don't need this line, and we don't need all of this. Do keep some of this going into the belly, though, because otherwise it'll look too awkward. Alright, so this makes up the back leg. Now for this front leg right here where he's running, it's pretty much the same thing that we did just now. We've got the ankle bump, goes down, and then we're just going to mimic it and then draw the thigh. So to start with though, I noticed that this comes out of the opposite part of the ankle where the knee is. It's going to drop down straight, and then we're going to have a little bit of a bump, and then it's going to go back up straight. So right about here-ish, I'm going to drop it down straight, just a little ways, do a slight curve like a parenthesis, do a tiny flat line to indicate where the foot's touching the ground, and then I'm just going to diagonal line that back up. This is just indicating where they have that little bump on the back of their leg thing. And then I'm just going to draw it up a little bit. Don't quite touch this. As soon as you feel like you're about to touch it, you're just going to draw the curve of the thigh, like this. So diagonal line, slightly diagonal line, a little bit of a smiley face line. All right, so from here, we're actually getting pretty close. Here, let's go ahead and draw the tail. So if you want to draw the tail like this, most Razorbacks don't have their tails that curly. That's more of a pig thing. But if you are wanting to draw that, if this is the back of the thigh, all you do is you start on the thigh, you're going to draw a spiral, touch the thigh inward like this, and then you're just going to add kind of like a little floof on the end of it that's a teardrop shape. It's kind of curvy. So that's how you would draw the curly pigtail. If you wanted to draw this one, you can draw this along with me up here. So what I would do is I'd find where it looks like it should be coming out of. So the tail is just an extension of the spine, so you don't want it to be like too far down. So I'd start it like right about here-ish. All I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a smile, switch it to a frown, then I'm going to add a teardrop shape. So all I'm doing is I'm doing that another switch with a smile, and then I want to make it very thin, but then make it get a little thicker as it gets closer to the body. Alright, so I've got a lot of extra lines everywhere. That's okay, ignore that. Alright, so here's the very basic body. If you're going for something cartoony, you can leave it, but it doesn't feel like a Razorback because it's missing something very important, the razors. The razors are what's the nickname for these little spiky things on the back. So we can see that it's very fluffy here, it's fluffy on the backs of the legs, and it's fluffy on the belly and the jaw. So to draw that, what I would do is I'm going to draw these. Let's call it a Z line or a spike line. So to draw this, just make sure that they're not all perfectly straight, because otherwise it feels a little awkward. Allow your lines to curve a little bit by drawing like a parenthesis, or frowny face, smiley face, whatever shape that you need to. And allow your stuff to be random with it. So it's okay if you kind of scribbly, just don't like don't actually scribble. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first add a razor on the back of the body. So usually whenever I add textures, I slightly erase it to where I can still see it, and then I just go back through and I just add the kind of fluff textures until I'm satisfied. So you can make these as big as you want or as small as you want. If you're doing cartoony, you can be like Sonic the Hedgehog big and like you have massive spikes if you want to. That's entirely up to you. Alright, so I do see that we have a little bit of razor on the back of the leg, a little razor on the belly, little razor on the side of the leg. So you add it anywhere that you want to. You don't have to add it everywhere that I'm adding it. You just add it to the parts that you personally want to add it. I just really love textures. That's why I kind of go a little overboard sometimes, because it's really fun to add textures. All right. Ooh, something we forgot. We need to do the feet. Sorry, I almost lost that. All right. So all we need to do, if you're going to do that kind of more cartoony style, we just have like a little diagonal line will indicate the other toe, because they have their feet split up into two toes. And then you can just draw a curve to kind of cut those off. So it is the diagonal line with a little smile above it. So there we have our little hog's feet. All right, so, there we go. Okay, now we've got our little hog guy. We have like the little ear up here. All that looks good. If you have any extra lines that you have not erased, feel free to get rid of those. All right, so ignoring all my scribbles in the background, I think that looks like a pretty decent cartoony one. So that could be a cool design for like a redesign for this one. There are some additional things that if you want to add, you can add some other things. For example, they have a double razor going on in here to make it look even fluffier there. So it's entirely up to you what you want to add, but if you're going for the cartoony aesthetic, you're done. Oops, sorry, camera cut out. All right, so in order to draw it more realistically, what we're going to do is we're going to draw a little bit more texture, a little bit more lumpy, rough parts, because it looks too smooth and clean. So to rough it up a little bit, what we're going to do is we're going to add wonks. So for example, right here in the shoulder, it's like a super perfect curve line. So what I would do is I'd go back in, make it a little bit more lumpy. So instead of being perfectly smooth, we're going to add a little bit more of indentions in some areas. Now, it helps if you know the muscle anatomy. So I'm just looking anywhere that I see that there's an indention in this picture. I'm adding a little bit more of an indention on the actual picture itself. I can add that in a couple other areas. For example, on like the thigh area, I can add a little bit of a wonky texture to kind of indicate that more muscly appearance. On the legs, I do see there's a lot of detail I can add to the legs, we have like the, I don't know what that's called. It's a little wider right here in some areas. So I would make it to where I have a little bit more of a lump there in order to make it wider. I do see that there's a little bit of a bump on the back of the foot after the toes. So I'm just going to add kind of like the letter J or like a little smile to the back of the leg in order to make it look like it has a little bit more of a bump texture there as well. So this one we already have that there. This one we don't have it yet, so I'm going to go and add that. A little bit of a curve or a J attached to it, just to add a little bit more of a bump to it. And then for the face, it looks a little too clean and smooth. One thing that I would change about it is I would add a little bit more wrinkly texture. So all I'm doing is I'm drawing kind of like parentheses, but as I draw them, I'm just adding a little bit of a wiggle of texture. So add a little bit of curvy textures around the muzzle, maybe a little bit above the muzzle as well to indicate that it's kind of snarling a little bit. Maybe add a little bit of a texture to these kind of wrinkles up here. I'm going to add little smiley textures below the eye because they usually have kind of wrinkly faces in that area. I can change this to make it a little bit more wrinkly up here. Adding on the inside of the ear, we do see kind of that double ear line, so I would start in the middle of the ear, and then I would just do kind of a frown to the top of the ear like this, and then we could add some little lines to indicate the little floof-floofs that they have inside of their ears. It's actually kind of cute. Something I would suggest doing is on the back of the eye, kind of draw like a little bit of a fuzz to kind of extend it just a little bit so that it looks like it has that kind of I don't know, you know those little lines that go down on their faces? I don't know what they're called. Like little tear tracks, but they're not crying. I don't know. Anyway, yeah. So then we could add something. Actually, the eye I feel like looks too cartoony, so you don't have to. I'm going to erase the eye. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller because something about hogs and pigs in general is they have really tiny eyes compared to their heads. So I'm just going to make that smaller. There you go. That feels a little bit more natural. Yeah, that looks so much better, I think. All right. So I'm just going to add a little bit more texture. It's very easy to go overboard, so actually I might be going overboard, so don't go too crazy. All right, I would kind of like control my floofs a little bit more, add maybe a little bit more floofs in between the existing floofs. I can still keep my extra long razors if I want to. Something that you can do to kind of split up your floofs, if you have a floof like this, start at the tip and then just bring it down like this, and that can kind of break up that floof so you don't have to necessarily always draw an additional floof. You can just split that current floof up. Some other areas that I see that might need more attention, I might need a little bit more fur in some other areas, especially in the parts that are a little bit darker. You remember, always, it helps if you're wondering where should I add some more fur texture. Anywhere that you see a shadow or like an indication of the muscle, that's where you want to add the shadows at. So here I'm just adding shadowy textures to like that big muscle lump, maybe a little bit right here. So just looking around and seeing what parts you think would benefit from having more fluffs or having more texture, and only add it in those areas. If you add it to the entire thing, you can, but that's going to take a lot longer, and if you're not careful and paying attention to what direction the fur is going, then it can end up looking a little silly. Alright, so I'm actually kind of liking this now. At first I was a little worried about it. Alright, so on the tail, in order to make this look more like fluff and not like a weird teardrop, I'm just going to draw little fluffs coming out of the bottom center and then bringing it back up from the top center. So to do that, this is a good hair texture trick. If I have this and I want to make it look furry, just pick a point. So this is where the tail is attached. I'm just going to draw little smiles on this side, little frowns on this side, little smiles on this side, little straightish lines on the middle. That way I have texture here, and then I'm just going to bring it back down on this side so I have texture here. That way I leave a little bit of a highlight area in the middle. It's okay if some of those lines touch, but this kind of helps bring out that texture of the floof. Alright, so actually I feel like if I add too much I'm going to ruin it, so I'm actually going to leave it there. If you want to, you can add some shading and coloring. Usually just a general rule of thumb, I like shading in the parts that should be a little bit darker, so like where the light's not touching it. I usually pick my light source at the top. Should probably try to change that up a little bit every now and then, but that's okay. Notice that especially with the back legs, usually a lot of artists will shade the back legs just to kind of help separate them from the rest of the body. So just anywhere, like I'm using my picture as a reference right now. So anywhere that I see that it needs to be a little bit darker, I'm just adding a little bit more of that kind of shady texture to help bring out and emphasize different parts of the body. Alright, so I like that a lot better than I thought it was, so it's kind of cute. So that's all I'm going to show you for today. Hi, Allie. She's saying bye, I guess. If you got to this point, good job. I would love to see your drawings, so feel free to email them to me and let me know how you did. If you have any troubles or if you struggle with something, let me know and I'll be more than happy to help. All right, have a good day. Bye.